Welcome to the Rewrite Your Life Story podcast, hosted by your favourite duo, Stephen and Charlene. They're here to help you transform your mindset and create a positive outlook on life. Are you tired of feeling stuck and unfulfilled? Are you ready to take control of your thoughts and emotions and rewrite your story? Well, you're in the right place. They will be sharing inspiring stories, practical tips, and expert advice to help you on your journey to a better you. You'll learn how to let go of negative self-talk, embrace your strengths, and focus on the good things in life. Each episode will be joined by amazing guests who have rewritten their own life stories and are now living their best lives. From successful entrepreneurs to accomplished athletes, we'll bring you stories of resilience, courage, and triumph. So grab a cup of coffee, get cozy, and get ready to be inspired. Tune in every week for a new episode of the Rewrite Your Life Story podcast. Let's rewrite our stories together and make every day count.
In today's episode, we interview Zane Landin from Chino, California. A mental health and disability advocate, queer rights activist, and entrepreneur and positive change maker, Zane is a founder of PositiveVibes Magazine, a digital magazine dedicated to telling authentic stories about mental health, wellness, and inspiration. Join us today as we delve into his story.
Before we get started, we want to remind you that the information presented in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. The views and opinions expressed by the hosts and their guests are their own and do not represent the views of any organisation or entity. Additionally, any information presented should not be taken as legal, medical, or financial advice. Always consult with a licensed professional in the respective field for any advice or guidance. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's dive into today's topic and learn how to transform our lives through positive thinking and taking control of our stories. Thanks for joining us.
Before we begin, we want to give you a heads up. We may be discussing some sensitive and personal topics that might bring up some strong emotions or discomfort. Our goal is to create a safe and supportive space, but we know that everyone's experiences and triggers are different. If you start feeling overwhelmed or triggered during an episode, remember to prioritize your well-being. It's totally okay to hit pause and take a breath. Your self-care is important, and looking after your mental and emotional health should always come first. If you ever need extra support, we encourage you to reach out to a mental health professional or someone you trust. You're not alone, and there are resources available to help you on your personal journey. Thank you for joining us on this incredible ride with the Rewrite Your Life Story podcast. Together we'll navigate life's challenges and rewrite our narratives with strength and resilience.
Hey everyone, it's Stephen and Charlene, and welcome to another episode of Rewrite Your Life Story podcast. I'm really excited today. We've got Zane Landin all the way from California joining us. And Zane is the founder of the PositiveVibes Magazine. So Zane, tell us a little bit about your story and just tell us your background to start off with.
Sure. I'm Zane Landin. I'm 25 years old. I currently work for the National Geographic Society doing internal communications. I just acquired my Bachelor of Science in Communication in May of 2022. And it was November of 2022 where I landed the role working for National Geographic. And I've been doing that since. I specialize in communications and storytelling. And I find I have such a passion for storytelling. And I think it's a bright way of how we can connect communities and understand that we're all on the same page. Even if we are threaded by difference, I think that storytelling is what keeps us connected. And that's where you think you see such beautiful vibrance coming out when you tell the real raw stories of what communities go through and how they're actually inspiring change in the world. And so I've always been fascinated with public speaking and writing, even though I actually was not the best writer growing up. It's just very funny that I struggled with writing and now it's something I do all the time. I don't know if I could see myself not doing that. And so I write for several blogs about wellness, mental health, wellness, a lot of different things. Yeah, I think that kind of sums up what my background is and what I'm working on right now.
Tell us a little bit about growing up, about what made you take this journey.
I think that the journey of finding my passion for storytelling really came through university. I never really thought that that was a potential career path. I think that there's a lot of careers that we don't educate people on and that there's so many options you can take with your degree. And I'm really passionate about mental health. And I think that I don't necessarily say that I decided on the path of mental health that kind of found me. because, when I was young is when I actually experienced mental health conditions from a young age. I had hard time maintaining my anger. I was very sensitive. So a lot of different things I struggled with growing up, and a lot of it was an issue with emotional management. And so I was used to addressing mental health from a young age. And I saw like a psychologist from middle school to high school. For the most part, it was me addressing my own mental health. I didn't become an advocate, a serious advocate, until I was in university, which was my third year, which is kind of like where I do rewrite my story. I don't know if you want to go into that now, but that's where I became an advocate coming from the situation and how I rewrote my story. And I came out as an advocate.
Yeah, tell us about that journey.
Sure. I mean, like I mentioned, I experienced, again, mental health from a very young age, but there was a point in my life, especially in university, my third year, where I felt like I had no control. There was a lot of different things happening that I struggled with. And I felt like I had no support. I felt like the most isolated I'd ever been in my life. I really didn't think I had anyone I could turn to. I had a group of people that supported me, but I really isolated myself. And I really felt like I was in this space of hopelessness all the time. And so I was thinking about suicide a lot. And so that was a huge struggle of mine. And I thought about it a little bit here and there growing up. It's just something I experienced. But then this interesting time where I was thinking about it almost constantly. And of course, that's a very scary territory. And I didn't really know what to do with that. Even all the years I had in having a psychologist, I still struggle with what do I do? And I still felt the effects of the mental health stigma, because the mental health stigma is so ingrained in our culture. Even though I spent years addressing my mental health, I still felt ashamed of how I was feeling. Even after all that work, that's how I know that the mental health stigma is so strong, especially how it impacted me later on, to the point where I know there's nothing wrong with addressing your mental health. I know there's nothing wrong with seeing a psychologist, but there's still something there that made me feel ashamed of how I was feeling. Maybe because it felt so extreme than I had before. I'm not sure. So I always had to make sure that if I catch myself not wanting to see a psychologist or not wanting to address my mental health, how much is coming from stigma for that reason. So I thought about suicide. I actually started engaging in self-harm, like physical self-harm. I'd never done that before in my life. So it's clear that, there was a lot going on. It was a really hard time. And I decided that I needed to do the right thing and take care of myself at the end of the day. And I took the semester off, and I didn't want to prolong my education. And I was certainly not going to drop out, but I needed to just take the semester off. I needed to just reset my mind and reset my values and really determine what I really wanted and what was going to help me in the long run. And I just decided to reflect on everything that I've been through. And it was time that I was just more communicative, that I decided to, again, rewrite my story, where instead of me focusing so much on other people or focusing so much on a lot of things, let me start focusing on myself. And so that's what I decided to do. I communicated more with people. I actually decided what I wanted in my life and the boundaries that I needed to set. And after I did that, I just was inspired, not just by what I was going through, but that there's a whole community of people that are experiencing things similar to me and things very much worse that seem probably incomprehensible to me, on how hard what some people go through with their mental health, and that they don't even have access to mental health care. And luckily I did, because I was in university and there was psychologists on site if you ever needed support. And because of that, even after everything that happened, I still wanted to be involved in organizations, so that I was always taking care of my mental health. I always had people that knew what I was going through. And then just doing that, I just got more involved in the work. I joined committees. I started a chapter at my university for this mental health organization. And so doing things like that put me on this path of being an advocate. And so it really was not necessarily I found it, but it felt like, again, the mental health path found me, because if it didn't, I probably wouldn't be here. So that is kind of how I rewrote my story. And I know it's like one aspect of my story, but it's such an important part. I don't know who I'd be at all without that happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Then you mentioned that at one stage you were going through self-harm, and I know a lot of people would go through a downward spiral with that. What was the turning point for you to make you decide that, okay, this is enough, I just want to reset now?
Well, one of the reasons was I was just not doing really well in school. And so I was struggling really badly in school, and I didn't want it to impact my grade point average. And I still wanted to have a good grade point average, because up to that point, I was doing incredibly well in university and I loved university. So it was just a very difficult time. And I think the turning point, I don't know, I think it just happened. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it was like I thought about it. It kind of just came to me. It wasn't to like leave the semester, because that was not in my mind. But I think I just was just super upset one night, and I called my mom and I was just super upset. And I told her everything. She really wasn't aware of what was going on. And so she felt very concerned. And, we both researched that I could leave the semester and I could come back. And so I don't know if there was necessarily like a one moment that was a turning point. It felt like a lot of different events coming up and then all of a sudden just kind of bundled together and it kind of exploded. And so it wasn't like a major turning point, but all those things that were happening was what led me to just make that phone call and actually talk to my mom honestly about what was going on.
And that took a lot of courage, probably from you.
Yeah, because I felt really ashamed about it and I didn't know how people would react or how my mom would react. And I felt like I was lying for a long time because I wasn't explaining what was going on. And that's not really fair for anyone because I'm lying to myself and I'm also lying to my family. And I'm sure they wanted to definitely know what was going on. But again, I think sometimes you're like so clouded in your judgment when you feel alone that if you feel alone, it just keeps moving down. It's like you have this idea that you feel alone, then you are like subconsciously self-isolating yourself and you feel even more alone. And then you just kind of put yourself in such a dark place where the shadow feels so strong that it doesn't feel like you can go to anyone. And so, yeah, I guess it would kind of take courage. And, I applaud anyone that reaches out when they need help because it's such a hard thing to do. It doesn't seem like it should be hard at all to reach out and ask for help. But I think we just live in such a culture where we have to like put up a front where we're always mentally strong or we always have everything together. And the people that don't, there's quote unquote something wrong with them and they're judged for it rather than I think we should all admit that, we're all going through an ongoing journey that has its ups and downs. I don't think many people have it together and that's okay.
I love what you just said. The shadow feels so strong. And I love how you've just put that outside as the shadow. Do you want to explain that a little bit deeper? Because I just feel that that's a really powerful statement.
Yeah. And I think sometimes when we look at our shadow, we forget that it's connected to us. And that when we look at darkness and it's like this idea of like light and dark, we forget that it's coming from us and that, that your shadow is you. And so I think that's why when you travel to the light, your shadow gets bigger, like yourself. If you're going to be looking for the truth and you're sorting out the truth in yourself, you're going to learn stuff about yourself that you may not like, new things about yourself, and your shadow grows bigger. That doesn't mean you should be afraid of it. I think sometimes when those dark moments, they come over you, I think it's worth exploring and not trying to run away from it because it's a part of you. You don't want to run away from the parts that are in you because then you're just going to avoid them. And then that shadow will grow even larger where it's too overwhelming rather than I understand my shadow exists and it's there. It might be overwhelming right now, but I know it's there and I know that it's the other side that can help me. And so it's like not being afraid of your own shadow, but knowing that it's a guide for you. It's something to help you if you're ever feeling like you're in like a pit of darkness, if that makes sense.
So powerful. Thank you so much. That's amazing, Zane. You call yourself an advocate for disabilities and mental health. Talk a little bit more about when you talk about an advocate of disability, what does that mean to you?
To me, that means, and really is going to depend on what each person is an advocate. Some people are political advocates. Some people are advocates in the workplace. Some people are advocates for their mom or their father as a caretaker. I think that is somewhat being an advocate because they're advocating on behalf of the person they're supporting. And so for me as an advocate, it's like just being vocal about the issues that people with disabilities experience all the time. If that's ableism, which is anti-disability, about how they're not going to be hired, or homelessness in the disability community. And a lot of the things that I do, I get involved in a lot of organizations. And right now where I work, I'm actually like co-chair of their disability network. And so right now that's a lot of the disability work I do is right now in the workplace. And that is what I'm really passionate about is, how do we actually make the workplace more accessible and more inclusive to all communities, especially people with disabilities and mental health. And of course, all communities are important on this front. But for me, I want to focus on those communities, and especially since I belong to those communities as well.
Zane, you said that when we were reading your bio, you said that one of the most defining moments was last year when your mother passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And that left you motionless in your thoughts. Do you want to describe that moment and how it defines you today?
Yeah, I will say that at this point, because it's been 2 years. And so she passed in January of 2021. And I think because, again, this all ties back into mental health. I feel like, as you described, I felt emotionless because I didn't necessarily know how to react. And so there are many times where I felt numb, like I had no emotions. But feeling numb is an emotion, though. It just may not feel like it. That's what I think. But it was such a defining moment because I have never gone through grief in that way with such a close person in my life. And unfortunately, I had to be the person I was closest with. And I think that's what made it the hardest, because I'm not saying that it gets easier or when you lose a lot of people, it gets easier, because that's not true at all. But I think if I lost a couple of people that were close to me, my mom's death would have been really hard, but it was such a shock though. And I'd never experienced it before. So I had no idea how to feel because I'd never experienced it in that way. So I had no idea that actually it's okay to be emotionless. You don't have to be emotional. You don't have to be crying, because grief is a wave of emotions. It's never like one emotion you're experiencing. And some people, when someone passes away in 2, 3 weeks, they're happy. Don't know why, they just are. They're still grieving though. I think we have to look at grieving as not just being sad. So I think that we want to hold on to that sadness because of course we lost a piece of ourselves that was them from our life. But I think that you can be happy. You can feel guilty. You can feel sad. You can feel irritated. You can be angry. And so I don't think that there's like an appropriate way to grieve, as long as you're just not hurting other people and yourself. I think you grieve the way you want to. Hopefully it's in a healthy way and you can express that. But yeah, it was such a defining moment because it was with someone that I loved so much and someone that was in my life from the very beginning, of course. And she supported me in every single thing, even the moments where, like I said, I felt so alone. Who was the person I called at the end of the day was my mom, even though for a long time I felt like I didn't have anyone. And that was not on them. That was a lot of me. And I didn't think that I could come to them because of what I was experiencing. And so every single thing that I've done, my mom was always a huge support of. And one of the things that was always hard was when she passed, I could never hear her voice again. I think that was one of the hardest things because especially after, like, my mom was always a huge support of what I was doing with my career and my advocacy, always like the biggest cheerleader. And so there were so many things that I knew she would be excited about. Like I got an internship at NASA a couple of years ago. I went to the White House, invited to speak on mental health, youth mental health. And I know that my mom would have been on the flight with me to DC. And so just many things like that I don't get to share with my mom anymore. But I'm still a firm believer that there is an afterlife and that we're kind of just spirits here. And we eventually return to whatever it is. I really don't know if it's a higher power, higher order, if we are recycled in the universe. I saw a video that was really interesting called The Egg. It's like our reality. And it's like we're one being and we're recycled back into different people. Like we're reincarnated. I'm just open to any perspective on this, which is why I'm very open to any religions. I'm part of a Buddhist chapter, mostly because I don't know what I don't know. And so I can't really judge what people believe if there's an afterlife or if there is God. I just can, what I believe in. I think there's something out there. I just not sure, but I'm very hopeful that there is because I've had things in my life where I felt my mom's presence or I was able to still feel her energy and it doesn't feel like it's gone. And there is that thing that what is it, energy or matter cannot be created or destroyed. It just gets moved. And so when my mom's passing, it just moves somewhere else that's not here physically. And even when my mom passed that morning, I felt chills go through my body. And I think that was when she passed and it moved through me and I felt her. Ugh, it gives me like chills, but that's what I do think that, our energy just kind of moves somewhere else. And yeah.
So you still feel that connection. And it sounds like you've had a really beautiful mentor figure in your mother. And she still has an impact on you till today. What do you feel is the importance of having mentors in your life?
I think it goes back into we can't do everything on our own, that it's okay to ask for help. And I know when I say that, you're thinking like, oh, well, getting medical help or getting mental health care help. Yeah, of course. But I think that there's a million other things that we can't do on our own. And it's sad that, there are many people that think that they have to navigate the world independently and independence is strength, which I don't think it is. I think it can show a level of competence that you have, but there's nothing wrong with having a community around you that can uplift you. And why wouldn't you want that? I mean, if you want to kind of navigate the world on your own, you want to achieve things on your own, that's great. And that's exciting if it works for you. But for me, I do need a village. I do need a support system. And I always have mentors for many different reasons. If it's personal or if I have professional mentors and I seek them and I talk to them about different things. And it's always interesting how a lot of these mentors start off professional, but like now I talk to some of them, we're just like almost friends now. We don't hang out or anything, but when we talk about personal things that are important to each other. It's not even just the professional. And I also think that, every person that we encounter has a purpose. And so like when you meet these mentors, I think that their purpose is to guide you and you guide them as well. That's what I would say. I'm a huge advocate for getting a mentor. I think mentors have shaped my life in such a positive way. So yeah.
Zane, you spoke about going to the White House and you didn't get to experience that with your mother. However, do you want to talk to us about that experience and what that was like for you?
Oh my gosh, yes. I first saw the application for this program called the Mental Health Youth Action Forum. It was opened in November of 2021, and I discovered it and I was completely hooked because, for one, it was youth mental health, which I don't see a lot of programs addressing youth mental health as much as I would wanted. And it was at the White House. Like when I saw White House, I was like, all right, this is very interesting. I need to apply for this. And I just also saw that there were several nonprofits involved, like a lot of partners, like the JED Foundation and National Alliance on Mental Illness. I was like, okay, I know stakes are high. I know that this is an important event because these are incredibly credible organizations. Like they have a huge foot in the mental health sphere. And so if they're involved, I know that this is an authentic experience. And it was also planned by MTV. So there was so many things happening with this one social program that they planned. And yeah, I decided to apply for it. And of course, I had those moments where I didn't think I should apply. So I didn't think I would ever achieve something like that, or I was never at that level until I just had to set my ego aside, not like a big ego, but this ego of that was holding me back, kind of like the shadow holding you back. I should say shadow instead. And so I decided to just kind of disband on that mindset and just hit that apply button. And then it was like in January, I got an email that I was a semifinalist. So I filled out another application. Then a month later, they congratulated me that I was selected, one of 30 that was going to go to the White House to advocate for youth intersectional mental health. When I first got the email, it was just hard to believe. It didn't really feel real, but it was a very real thing. And I got to go to the White House in May of 2022. And it was just an incredible experience where I got to meet government officials. I got to meet the First Lady of the United States. Nowhere was President Joe Biden on any of the press releases. So none of us expected him to be there. But after the event, he actually did show up and greeted all of us. I mean, there's actually like several photos of him taking a selfie with us and an official White House photo as well. It warmed my heart that he was able to attend because I really can't imagine how busy being the president of the United States is, and that he actually took the time out of that really busy schedule to be there and greet us. Yeah, it was just a huge honor. And also just a big milestone for this country and where we're headed when it comes to mental health policy and advocacy.
Awesome. You mentioned the word intersectionality, mental health. For our listeners that don't know what that is, do you want to explain what that term means?
Yeah, and for listeners, I would look it up because this is what I believe intersectionality is and what my definition is. So what I believe it is, when you hear the term intersectionality, it just that means that every single part, every single identity that we carry is important in the grand scheme of things. So when you look at someone, let's say, I'll even use me as an example. Like you can talk about addressing mental health, but I'm also queer. So we have to address queer mental health, and that every single part of me does make me up who I am. And you cannot just address one thing. You can't address one layer. You have to address all the layers to make sure that we are effectively addressing the issue if we don't address the sub-issues. So we can address mental health. What does that mean? We have to address mental health from the queer standpoint, from the disabled standpoint, from anything, honestly, any single social issue or social identity you have to include in the mental health conversation. That's what intersectionality is. And also just shows that, again, the moving parts in us make up who we are, and that those experiences and those dynamics are different. So I could find someone very similar to me, but we're still going to have vastly different experiences. And that's what intersectionality is. And someone that's like me, I'm half Hispanic. Someone else that's half Hispanic, if they're not queer, we have very different experiences. And we have to explore what those mean. And we have to make sure that we're inclusive of the stories we tell and the policies that affect people, that we're including all those different dimensions of what the human experience is.
That's quite powerful.
Yeah, it's very powerful. It's like you're really delving into the different ways that certain groups experience mental health or a lack of mental health.
Yeah, and I think that's the most effective way you can address mental health, because if you're going to address mental health and only a certain population can get resources, we're just leaving people behind, and that's not real advocacy, because millions of people are going to experience hardships and lack the resources to get the help they need then.
Yeah.
Zane, tell us a bit about what led you to find the magazine Positive Vibes, and what is your purpose for the magazine?
Well, actually, I started the magazine during like the first couple months of COVID. I was actually taking a university class. So this came out from a university class. I was taking copy editing, and our final project was we had to create our own publication. And so I did that. But I had this moment where I was texting my friend and I said, what if we actually started this together? Because I personally want to see a platform like this. And there are many platforms like it. But I wanted to kind of start one on my own and kind of facilitate that space from what I wanted it to be. And so I started PositiveVibes Magazine, and it was just a digital magazine dedicated to telling the stories of positive mental health. And when I say positive, I know that there's the term toxic positivity, which that means like you forfeit all the negative emotions, you only focus on the positive. That's not what I mean by positivity. When I say positivity, I mean like seeking the truth, seeking peace in our lives. And so some people look at the stories we publish and they ask, how is this positive? I'm like, it's positive because they're telling their story in the way that they want. Even if they've struggled, even if they've had hardships, it's their story. And that's the positive storytelling that we're talking about, the real truth of what people experience and how they've taken those experiences and are doing good in the world. That's exactly what positive storytelling is. And then since then, we've been able to feature over 90 people, and it's still growing from the span of, people who have started their own clothing lines, people who were previously in gangs, people who contemplated suicide, a lot of different angles. And also to show that the mental health experience is so diverse and that it really does impact everyone. We all have mental health. We don't all have like diagnosable mental health conditions, but mental health is something that truly does affect every single one of us. And that was the point of the magazine, is to show that it's such a diverse experience, but it is something that does connect us.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Zane, what do you see the next chapter of your life looking like?
Oh, gosh. That's always such a hard question because you never know. I will just say, I don't know what the next chapter is, but I really hope it's going to be a chapter where I'm around positive people that are supporting me as I will them. And that wherever I go, I always have intentions to do good in the world and always have kindness. And that's what my mom always taught me. And so I think when you put good energy out in the world, unfortunately, bad things happen to everyone. But I think, when you put good energy out there, especially when you go through something horrible and you still put good energy out there, people notice. And I think that it's hard for people to say something, but I do know that if you put good energy out there, people notice, and it really does impact their life. They may not tell you, but I'm telling you that it really does make an impact. And sometimes people just have a hard time saying it. But I think the hidden gems in society where just genuine, kind people need to be at the forefront more. Because I think that, our society has so much negativity, and even our news is rooted in negativity. And so, we have to keep hold of people who are positive and also be positive ourselves and bring out the best in others. I think that's the next chapter of my life. I don't know what it is, but I'm still going to continue my mission of always being kind and generous to others.
So, Zane, what advice would you give to someone who wanted to rewrite their own life story?
I guess you just question, if you are at this place where you're questioning on rewriting your story, why? Think about what you want in your life. Is there anything holding you back? And really evaluate what that is. Like really identify the gaps of what you're not seeing in your life. And of course, we can't get everything we want. I cannot just wake up tomorrow and be a millionaire or have the exact job that I want. But what are the deliberate steps I can take to make sure I'm on a good path like that? And so I really think it's hard work, because you really have to sit down with yourself, introspect, and reflect on what's going on in your life, what you can do better, what you can change. And change is always such a hard thing to do because we want to be comfortable. We want to be secure. We want to have stability. I think that stability is something that we all want. But sometimes if we're too stable, we're not being adventurous anymore. We're not seeking new challenges. We're not growing as humans if that's the case. If you want to stay in a stable mindset, I think that's great. If that's what you want and you're comfortable with. But what more can you be doing? How much more can you challenge yourself? What adventures can you be pursuing? And it all has to do with really evaluating, looking at what it is that you want, what you want your life to be like, and not doing it on your own. So I think a lot of people look at it and be like, I have to rewrite the story on my own. When someone writes a book, there are editors, there are partners, there are people looking at that story. You do not have to rewrite it all by yourself. There are people, I hope, that will help you rewrite it so you don't have to do it on your own.
Awesome. Thank you, Zane. And I think you alluded to it before. It's about community.
Yeah.
It's about building that community, that connection, that building community, because we were created for community. I believe that anyway. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Zane, if you could go back and rewrite your life story now, what would that look like?
Or would you? Have all your experience led you to today?
That's a hard question. I think because I think we're always rewriting our stories. I think you have a moment where, like I mentioned, university, where it was a big rewrite, a big rebrand in a way. But I think the way we look at it is we are rewriting our stories every single day. If you wake up in the morning and you try something new every day, or you learn something new every day, I think in a way you're rewriting your story, not a giant scale rewriting. And so I wouldn't say I would have this major rewrite right now, because I am really happy where I am. even the regrets I have in my life, I don't see them as regrets. I see them as this experience is what had to happen. And it's put me on a path that I'm happy with or that I'm proud to be on. Even if it means I had to lose my mom, sometimes that's just kind of how things are. To me, that's kind of how like the universe works. And it was an important lesson that I needed to learn. And I feel even stronger connection to my mom now than I ever did before. And I could say that a rewrite for me is I would rewrite her still here, but then I'd be a different person and I wouldn't have accomplished what I had and I wouldn't be the same person. And so who knows what I would be. And so I don't think a big rewrite is what I need right now, but small rewrites I'm good with.
I love that. We're all rewriting our story every day. Beautiful.
Zane, it's been a pleasure having you on our show. Thank you so much. And if you want to reach out to Zane, all his connections and socials will be in the show notes. Zane, thank you once again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now that we've interviewed our guest, join Charlene and I as we recap today's episode. I think with Zane, I really liked his openness to tell his story, but also there was no shame in what he had to say. He was totally authentic to who he is and true to himself.
Absolutely. He had so much integrity in there about who he was and just really open about his experience growing up with this experience of mental health and how it affected him.
And I love how he really put the community in healing, that it takes a community to heal, but it also takes a community to rewrite your story.
That's right.
And the importance of mentors in rewriting your story.
Yeah, so true. One of the things I noticed that he was very passionate about was the intersectionality of mental health, like just covering different groups and how different groups experience mental health.
And that no experience is the same.
That's right.
Like everyone is an individual and they will experience it in different ways.
That's right.
Thank you for listening to our podcast today. We hope you found it informative and inspiring. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and share it with your friends and family. Also, make sure to visit our website at www.rewriteyourlifestory.com.au to learn more about our mission, products and services. And remember, you have the power to rewrite your own life story. So go out there, face your challenges head on and create the life you've always wanted. We'll see you in the next episode.